Obviously, it's been a tough week as far as the news goes about the budget proposal released by the governor. Depending on how you look at it, if you look at what the General Assembly did last year, is about $103 million out of core for higher education, and then including the withholds and the additional proposed cuts this year, it's about another $103 million out of public higher education proposed by the governor. I will give Eric Greitens this, Governor Greitens. I will thank him for unifying the General Assembly and the Budget Committee, at least, at this point. For the first time since I've been down there, and seriously, I will thank him for it. For the first time since I've been down there, the Budget Committee is focused on higher education. And I've had numerous people come up to me and say, this is ridiculous. We can't do this multiple years in a row. Last year we cut $500 million. Last year we cut $500 million out of the budget, and it was, about 100 of that, a little over 100 was out of higher education. So there are other cuts as well that people are defending in other territory. This year it is squarely on, pretty much just higher education, which is a shame. I believe that Senator Rowden's called it. I'm not out of place here. You called it lazy. I think you called it lazy on the radio, right? And it was. I think it was a lazy approach for the governor to take. But I think for the first time we're having an honest conversation about higher education in Budget Committee, and I believe the Senate's having the same. We're going to do everything we can to restore that some of those funds. I don't know that we can get all the way there. I believe there could be cuts, but hopefully we can reduce those cuts and make the least worst situation that we can by the time that the budgets go into the governor's desk. Just won't go too much on a tangent. But so, I think one of my biggest concerns is just taking a broader look at the budget and the fact that here we are at full employment and an economy that is doing well, and we're having to make cuts to the budget again on the heels of making $500 million in cuts and an additional $250 million in withholds that happened day one of the budget year. That's very concerning, and it concerns me for a number of reasons. Like, if this is a good economy, and hopefully we'll see marginal gains in the economy. Hopefully we see wages increase over the next year. I think that's very possible. Hopefully there's some relief on wages, but the economy's not going to get a whole lot better than what it is right now. So what happens in the next downturn? I think that's what's most concerning to me is if we're cutting $100 million in FY18, another proposed $100 million out of FY19. What happens in FY 2021 or 2022 if there's a downturn? It's not if, but it's when at this point, right? The General Assembly overrode Governor Nixon's veto on Senate Bill 509 in 2014, and here we are. That was a 5-year phase-in of a tax cut bill. We're in the second year of that phase-in, and it's $240 million out of our budget this year. And if we hit the triggers next year, that's an additional $160 to take you up to $400 million out of the budget. Until it's fully phased in, it's well over $700 million a year that we will not realize as a state. And that's very concerning. If we hadn't done that, I'd like to think that we could take that $240 million and put some of that back into higher education. Get back where we need to be on fully funding the foundation formula, put some money towards infrastructure. Heck, if we have some money for broadband, how will we get broadband access to rural Missouri? I think that would be good too. There's some talk this year around some tax credit reforms, the idea of that. There's also a lot of talk about tying that tax credit reform to additional tax cuts. I believe the governor is going to go on a tour. It's delayed. Don't hold your breath. It's delayed at this point. It must have been the weather. It will happen within the next week or two. He's going to go around the state touting an additional tax cut here in the state of Missouri. When we are 2 years into a 5-year phase and a tax cut that's going to cost us $700 million a year. It's just ridiculous. I mean, if people lost their minds, seriously. I mean, I really do think it's fiscally irresponsible to have this conversation. And as someone who lives in Missouri, and I plan on living here the rest of my life, I want to make it so my son chooses to live in the state of Missouri. And if we keep going down this path of fiscal irresponsibility and cutting taxes just for the sake of cutting taxes, then we're not going to be able to provide a future for my son to live here that is adequate. We're not going to be able to fund education appropriately. We're not going to have a highly skilled, highly trained workforce that's necessary. We're going to have crumbling roads and bridges, possible we do right now. We're not going to have, you know, the modern infrastructure that we need to succeed in this 21st century economy. We don't need to grow government. We need to spend money appropriately to fund our priorities. And these talks of additional tax cuts, it is ludicrous. It really is. It really bothers me. I lose sleep on this. And I'm not just making that up. I do. You know, at the rate that we're going, you look what Kansas did. They bled out all their money all at once, right? They passed a massive tax cut. They implemented it immediately. We passed a tax cut and we're phasing it in. We're bleeding it out more slowly. They realized it very quickly that it bankrupted their state. And last year, they passed a tax increase. They undid the vast majority of that 2013 tax cut, 2012 tax cut. They undid most of it. And it's going to take a little bit. They're phasing that tax increase back in. But they understood that they made a mistake. I'm afraid by the time we fully phase this in, we're not going to completely realize what was going on, what happened. Maybe such a short-term memory anymore. We may not remember back to that 2014 session when that happened. You know, one of my biggest fears too is that, you know, 3 or 4 years down the road, KU is having an alumni legislative event like this, and you have, you know, have an elected official standing up there and pointing west and saying, or sorry, pointing east and saying, well, at least we're not in Missouri. That concerns me, and we need to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. We need to talk about tax credit reform. We need to talk about potentially eliminating or at least reducing the timely filing that certain businesses can take care of. It's a timely filing discount. Certain businesses get a 2% reduction on their tax liability just for filing their taxes on time. I don't get that. It sounds nice, but you know, maybe that's the money that we can realize. But if we can pass some tax credit reforms, or we can pass, you know, do some reductions on timely filing, then maybe we should realize that money back into the state. Maybe we should put that back into general revenue so we can fund our priorities properly. So I encourage you that when you hear the governor going around, when you hear these talks about additional tax cuts that are necessary, we're not the federal government. We can't print money. We can't pass tax cuts and blow up the deficit. We just can't do it. We have to have a balanced budget. And so if we're going to pass additional tax cuts, it's going to mean more cuts are coming. So I promise you, I'm a fairly optimistic person in real life. I look forward to the day in 2022 when I turn mountain and I could return to hopefully sleeping and not worrying as much about the budget. Thank you.